Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about treatments and cures for people living with HIV. We also talk about a new security concern for army schools in Jammu and Kashmir. But first, we talk about the monsoon session of Parliament. Since the monsoon session commenced last week, both houses of Parliament have become embroiled in a tense standoff between the ruling party and the opposition over the situation in Manipur. The state, as many of you would already know, has been grappling with a severe breakdown of law and order after ethnic violence erupted in May between its two key communities, the dominant Meitei and the Kuki tribes. Now, the opposition has raised concerns over the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi maintained a prolonged silence on Manipur and only spoke about it after a video started doing the rounds last week, which showed a mob sexually assaulting two women from the Kuki-Zomi community and parading them naked. And that's why the leaders from the opposition alliance have been demanding a statement from Modi and have called for an exhaustive discussion in Parliament.
And we want a discussion here on Manipur. We want a discussion and the Prime Minister has to open his mouth. Manipur.
But their protests and sloganeering have not yielded the desired results so far. And so they have changed their strategy and moved a no-confidence motion against the BJP government in the lower house. To understand what a no-confidence motion means in a situation like this and how the opposition is thinking about moving forward, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to the Indian Express's Manoj CG.
So Manoj, what is the opposition hoping would be the outcome of this no-confidence motion against the Modi government?
So it's largely a political statement by the opposition because we know the numbers are stacked against the opposition in the Lok Sabha. The BJP alone has 300 plus members. So there is no chance of the no confidence motion passing the muster of the Lok Sabha. But it's largely a political statement where the opposition is trying to say that the government has abdicated its responsibility and has failed to fix accountability when it comes to the violence in Manipur. And of course, they wanted the Prime Minister to make a statement. So when you move a no confidence motion, it of course forces the Prime Minister to reply to that. And during the course of the debate, the opposition parties can make all these points about how the Prime Minister was silent for almost 75 to 80 days since the violence broke out in Manipur. The Prime Minister broke his silence only when that powerful visual of two Kuki women being paraded naked came out on the eve of the parliament session. So it's largely a political point that the opposition wants to make. And during the course of the discussion, every party, every leader will get a chance to speak. A short duration discussion under 2.5 hours or maybe 3 to 4 hours will not give the opposition that much time and space to raise all their points. So it's a political point that the opposition wants to score. In Rajya Sabha, of course, there is no scope for moving a no confidence motion. So the Rajya Sabha will remain agitated since their demand for a statement by the Prime Minister has not been met. So that house will have a separate strategy. But as far as Lok Sabha is concerned, this is the main strategy of the opposition where they want to, focus enough attention on this issue. Remember, we are in an election year. There are a couple of key state elections coming up. Elections in Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana later this year. And of course, next year, April, May, there will be general elections. So it's largely a political battle between the India Alliance and the NDA, which is now playing out in Parliament.
And what made the opposition change their strategy? Because initially they were protesting in the well and also outside the Parliament over the PM's silence on Manipur.
As far as Lok Sabha is concerned, in fact, as far as Parliament is concerned, there is a sense in viewing many of the opposition parties that, plain disruption, adjournment of both the houses may not serve the purpose. It will only give the ruling party an opportunity to push through bills without discussions. On Tuesday, we saw a couple of bills being passed in Lok Sabha. So there was this view also which was emerging from many of the MPs in the opposition camp. So that is why this shift in the strategy to moving a no confidence motion, wherein a discussion, of course, what they want and a Prime Minister's statement that will happen. And at the same time, if a debate on the no confidence motion is listed, they can still allow the House to function, wherein the members will get a chance to speak on bills. Many of the bills the Congress and many of the opposition parties are planning planning to oppose, for instance, the personal data protection bill, the bill that will replace the ordinance for the National Capital Territory of Delhi, the biodiversity bill. So they can, of course, make their points opposing these bills, try to secure as many numbers as possible to try and stall some of these bills in Rajya Sabha. So all that they can do. At the same time, a discussion will also happen.
Right, and Manoj, when the discussion does take place, do we know what kinds of points the opposition is planning to raise regarding the Manipur issue?
Yeah, there are a couple of dimensions which the opposition is looking at. That powerful visual of, two women being paraded naked, that has, of course, shown the conscience of the nation. So the opposition wants to target the government on the issue of women's safety. That is why the BJP is hitting back, talking about atrocities against women in Congress ruled Rajasthan and in TMC ruled West Bengal and all. So that is one issue which the opposition is looking at. There is a sense in the opposition parties that, women form a major support base of the BJP, largely because of the welfare schemes of the BJP government. So this is where they want to score a point. So that is one dimension. The second, of course, is a breakdown of the law and order in Manipur and the centers, what they believe failure to control the situation in Manipur. They're the catchword of the BJP. A political slogan they always use in state elections is a double engine government. A BJP government at the center and a BJP government in the state. Because in Manipur, it's the BJP government which is in power. So this they can expose this slogan of the BJP that even if the BJP government is in the state and the center, it doesn't mean that it is all good. And thirdly, they believe the BJP is on the back foot over the Manipur situation. And perhaps that's why the Prime Minister spoke about Manipur on the opening day of the monsoon session. So they believe they can corner the government on this. And at some level, the opposition parties believe if pushed to the wall, if pushed to the corner, the BJP may ask Manipur Chief Minister and Biren Singh to resign, although the indications that are coming from the BJP is that they may not. But there is a sense that it can happen. So if that happens, then the opposition can, of course, claim it as a victory for them that they raised this issue and they forced the resignation of a chief minister who had failed to control the situation. So there are multiple dimensions to the opposition demand.
And could you tell us what makes the Manipur issue different from previous attempts by the opposition to target PM Modi on issues like the power of the governors or the Adani issue? Why do they believe that Manipur will be more impactful than those issues?
Most of the opposition parties had, different issues on their agenda coming into the session. The DMK in Tamil Nadu, the MK Stalin government has had a run-in with the governor, RN Ravi there. The Aam Aadmi Party was agitated over the ordinance, snatching away the powers of the Delhi government over services in Delhi. The Shiv Sena and the NCP were reeling under a split. Of course, the opposition believes that those splits were engineered by the BJP. So the Congress, of course, was talking about, the attack on the federal structure, attack on the constitutional institutions, the misuse of agencies. So all these parties had different issues on their agenda and they would have ideally taken up all those issues. But Manipur is different because many of the leaders believe that on all the other issues, the BJP has an effective counter. If you talk about the role of governors or attack on the federal structure, the BJP can easily counter listing out several instances of some central intervention of similar nature or overreach by governors during the Congress rule over the years since 1947 when it comes to the Adani issue or issue of crony capitalism. The BJP would, of course, counter talking about corruption allegations and the cases against opposition leaders. So on all these issues, they believe the BJP can counter them. But in case of Manipur, of course, the BJP can talk about law and order situation in other states and all, but given the large-scale violence that the state witnessed, given the complete lawlessness that Manipur witnessed over the last 80 days, and given those visuals that had come out, the opposition believes that the BJP is on a weak wicket and it may find it difficult to counter many of the charges. So that is perhaps why Manipur now figures high on their agenda. It's a larger political point that they want to make, which is how the central government has failed, how the BJP state government has failed, how all the political slogans of the BJP, be it on women's safety, welfare of women, be it on good governance, all those slogans have come a cropper.
And Manoj, considering how each state and each party in the opposition alliance have their specific agendas, how do they plan to sustain their efforts on the Manipur issue, especially considering that it's an election year?
So electorally, many of the parties accept that it may have little, resonance in the Hindi heartland states or the South Indian states or Maharashtra or other states. But as I told you, it's about exposing what the opposition believe, it's about exposing the double engine government political slogan of the BJP and how the central government could not handle the situation, how the BJP government in Manipur could not handle the situation, how the situation worsened. So it may not have a specific electoral resonance in many of the states outside the northeastern region, but there are issues on which it will give the opposition parties a talking point. For instance, the issue of nationalism. One of the BJP's main electoral plank is nationalism. Now, Manipur is a border state. The violence there will have repercussions when it comes to the visuals of those women who were paraded naked. One is the wife of a former Kargil war hero. So this will give the opposition talking points about how the BJP talks about nationalism, but this is what actually happening on the ground. And as I said, on other issues also, on women's safety, on double engine government. So all these will give the opposition talking points, which may not have a direct electoral resonance in many of the states. But when it comes to building a larger narrative against the BJP, these will all form part of the larger narrative which the opposition wants to build up against the BJP in the run-up to the general elections.
And next we talk about treatments and cures for people living with HIV. Recently, news broke out about an anonymous man known as the Geneva patient who has likely been cured of HIV after receiving a stem cell transplant for cancer, making this the 6th case where a person has been cured of HIV in this manner. Now, as we know, there is no known cure for HIV. And one can keep the virus under control by consuming specific medications throughout their life. That's why this news of 6 people getting cured of HIV while getting treated for cancer has been welcomed by people living with the virus. However, this news comes with a caveat. Turns out there is a chance that this stem cell transplant might not be used for treating people with HIV, despite showing signs of success. And to know why that is the case, here is Utsa again speaking to the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt in this segment.
So Anonna, could you first tell us about the Geneva patient and how he was cured of HIV?
So he was living with HIV since the 1990s and was, I think, in 2018 diagnosed with a leukemia. And the doctors weren't looking for him to get HIV free. They did a stem cell transplant for him, which is the standard of care for leukemia. And surprisingly, they found that his viral count and, immune response to the virus, it's all started going down after the transplant. And then once it started going down, they stopped his medicines and realized after 20 months that he was still virus free.
And could you explain how that happened? How a stem cell transplant for leukemia ended up helping this patient?
So basically, in any sort of blood cancers, because the blood is made in bone marrow, you need to transplant the bone marrow to cure these sort of leukemia and other blood cancers, and which is the treatment that people receive. So it's known that a certain mutation in the genetic code can make people sort of immune to HIV. So when you're doing a stem cell transplant or a bone marrow transplant, you're essentially changing your immune system completely. So it's somebody else's immune system. And if they have this mutation, then you are likely to become HIV free because of that. However, what is interesting about the Geneva patient is that patient's doctor did not select for this genetic mutation. The donor did not have this genetic mutation, and yet he became HIV free.
Right, and he was the 6th person who was cured of HIV through this process. Now, is there a chance that this procedure could become part of the HIV treatment?
So if you look at all 6 cases, these were patients who already had some sort of blood cancer and received the stem cell therapy for the cancer and not for HIV cure. And it was as a positive side effect, you could say, that they became HIV free. However, this cannot become a standard of care for HIV because stem cell therapy is very expensive. It is difficult. It has its own set of challenges. There could be like any transplant, the host body can refuse the, transplanted bone marrow. There are, any major medical procedure comes with risks. Those risks are still there. And right now, HIV treatment is quite good. So if you are on antiretroviral therapy, it's likely that your viral level will go undetected in the blood, which means you are unlikely to transmit the infection further. The problem with HIV is that you have to continue taking these antiretroviral therapies for life. You cannot stop it because the virus will come back. It doesn't remove the virus completely from your system, but the therapy is extremely effective. So when you have an effective therapy, doing a transplant, which has a lot of side effects as well, is not something that people would go for. Secondly, finding a matching donor with this particular genetic mutation is going to be difficult. You can't do it for everybody living with HIV right now.
So, Anonna, that means Indians living with HIV will also not be able to utilize this stem cell treatment because how rare this mutation is and the fact that it's only found in Caucasian people, right?
So yes, this mutation is quite rare. I think only 1% of the entire population has it from both their parents, and it is seen in Caucasian people. So one of the very important things when we're doing stem cell transplant is matching the donor and a recipient, like their blood typing is done and a lot of tests are done to match the donors, and you cannot have a match between two people who are of different races. So since we see this mutation mostly in Caucasian people, doing such a transplant in Indians would be difficult.
Right, and talking about India, could you tell us how prevalent HIV is in the country?
So the latest available report from the National AIDS Control Organization under the Ministry of Health says that there are an estimated 24 lakh people living with HIV in the country. And the prevalence has actually gone down in India since the 2000s. The prevalence was at the peak in 2000 and it has slowly gone down since then. And right now the highest prevalence is seen in the northeastern states like Mizoram, Nagaland, Manipur. We see the highest prevalence of HIV right now. Another good thing about this is that in India, although the HIV burden is quite high, seeing our population, we account for a large chunk of the global cases as well. But the conversion to AIDS, which is the disease, HIV is the infection, and then if it is not kept in control, then it progresses on to AIDS, which is the disease. So we do not have a very high number of people moving on to the disease and subsequently death. So that is a good thing.
And could you talk about the kind of interventions the government has made over the years to reduce the prevalence of HIV?
So we have brought down the prevalence in the country over the years through simple measures like, first of all, preventing transmission of the infection from mother to child. And that is done through giving the antiviral therapies to the mother when they are pregnant. Then you also look at targeted interventions in groups like sex workers, men who have sex with men, transgender persons who are at a higher risk of contracting the disease. And the government then focuses its a condom program in these populations and also promotes testing and putting them on therapy. The therapy also, over the years, we have increased access to it. So there's a measure called CD4 count. And like we mentioned, the HIV virus attacks CD4. So you would be put on therapy only beyond a certain CD4 level. Say when it reached 200, that is when you would be put on the antiretroviral therapy. But now we have removed any such barrier and anybody who's diagnosed with HIV is started on these medications for life. And once you have undetectable levels of the virus in the blood, you can't transmit it. And another thing that we have done is in people who use injection drugs. So we have a very good program called Needle Exchange Program, which actually in drug addicts, it replaces the needles that they use so that there is no needle sharing among people and transmission of HIV. They also teach how to inject the drugs, and it might seem counterintuitive, but it brings down the incidence of HIV. So these are the interventions that we have done.
Okay, and Anonna, could you explain to us why is it so hard to find a cure for HIV despite years of research and trials?
So there has been a lot of research and there is a lot of funding for HIV per se, but so far we haven't been able to find an effective cure or an effective vaccine for the disease. And that is mainly because HIV, when it infects a person, it enters into the genome of the person and then it can hide anywhere in the body in different cells. So what happens when we are taking these antiretroviral therapy, it prevents the replication of the HIV. So the virus is in the body, but it cannot infect more cells. But it cannot destroy these hidden HIV that's there in different cells. And that picks up again once you stop the therapy. That is one of the reasons. And then, of course, there are multiple types and subtypes of HIV, and you would need something that would work for all. So that hasn't happened. However, we do have now globally something called the prophylactic therapy available, which is like same antiviral therapy, which is given when you have a high risk exposure. So say a doctor getting exposed to an HIV positive patient's fluids, or somebody having sex with a person without protection. In such cases, they can have this pre-exposure or post-exposure prophylaxis, and that's been shown to be effective.
And finally, we talk about a new security concern for army schools in Jammu and Kashmir. In the last few weeks, authorities managing the various army schools in the Union Territory have been faced with a rather unexpected challenge: students receiving phone calls from Pakistani intelligence operatives. According to the Indian Express's Arun Sharma, who reports on J&K, the issue was first flagged by the students themselves in one of the schools.
Some students approached their school management saying that they have received call from these numbers. The numbers were beginning with international code +92, that is of Pakistan.
Soon after these phone calls were reported, the school authorities started reaching out to other army schools in the Union Territory. This was when they realized that these phone calls were being received not only by students at multiple army schools in Jammu and Kashmir, but also beyond. Like Arun mentioned, officials were able to identify 2 Pakistan phone numbers that were calling and sending WhatsApp messages to students. In almost all of these cases, the Pakistani intelligence operatives were posing as teachers from other army schools and asking the students for personal information.
The caller, he used to ask the student about his parents, what is his father doing, what are their teachers' name, what are your school timings, what is your bus route, like these questions. Just under the guise that they are checking whether things are going all right, buses are coming or something like that.
In fact, in some cases, the caller shared an OTP with the students and asked them to join WhatsApp groups, saying that the groups are meant for school students. Now, army schools are largely operated across the country for the children of military and paramilitary personnel. And in a place like Jammu and Kashmir, where militancy has been a long-standing concern, Arun says that security lapses like these are worrying.
It is seen as a security concern because in the past, during the 3 decades old militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, there have been numerous attacks on security forces establishments. And these army schools, they operate within the security army areas, army cantonment areas, you can say. A sizable number of teachers, they have army background. Most of the students studying in army schools have an army background. They are children of parents who are serving in the army. And that is why it raised alarm. Because in the past, there have been spurting incidents of militancy, especially in Rajouri and Poonch. Now things have been brought under control. Army, though there are attempts going on from across the border to push in militants into Jammu and Kashmir, but security forces and Jammu and Kashmir in joint operations, they have already killed 5-6 militants in the last couple of days. So by and large, things are seen as under control.
Since then, authorities that manage army schools are learned to have advised teaching staff to spread awareness among students and delete existing school groups on WhatsApp in case they have been compromised.
Yeah, when these things came to their notice, the army, the school management, they approached the school principals to sanitize their teachers, parents, and the students also. And because in this age, every school teachers, they have made class groups of students. They were asked to sanitize them about these. They circulated the numbers. They said they may be calling from other numbers also. They may be using the other modus operandi as well. So be alert. And if needed, you change your group. You dissolve the existing group and form a new group of students.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa Sarmin, Shashank Bhargava, and me, Rahel Philipose. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.